feel like I need to say something. I don't like cats, so if you do, good for you. I built it for my brother, so don't send me pictures. Just build it. Let's go.
All right, folks, to get started with this project, we went with 3/4 inch finished grade oak plywood. At your local hardware store, it's about 59 bucks a sheet. I used about 3.5 sheets on this particular project, start to finish. Now, one of the first parts on the project, we're gonna build the backdrop, which everything is gonna get secured to. To accomplish this, it's about 4.5 feet, and we are gonna beef it up a little bit. And to beef it up, we're gonna cut 2-inch long, or 2-inch wide, specifically, strips, and then we're gonna trim it out. Once it's trimmed out, we're gonna use the same 2-inch wide strips to fill in the middle as cleats for strength. You don't want this thing to flex or warp or bend. You want it to be nice and strong. When it comes to organizing all your layout, use blue masking tape and kind of play around exactly where you want all the cabinets and all the floating shelves to go. This will help you keep everything easy on the eyes. Now, like I mentioned in my previous videos, one of my approaches is to not dictate over this voiceover and bore you with the boring dimensions that you're not going to write down anyways. We'll perhaps save that for some detailed plans later down the future, but I will, however, give you the general layout of the dimensions. All the floating shelves, they're about the same. They're 4 inches thick and 33 inches long. Now, the cubbies, they all vary. The bottom one is 18 by 18 by 18, and the top one is 14 by 18 by 18 with a little bit of a slant. You can figure that part out, or I'll come back with more details later. Now, the drawer is 14 by 14 by, you guessed it, 18, and like you know, it's 5 by 4, the entire thing. So that's all I'll give you guys. We'll save the boring part, and then maybe later on we'll come back with some plans for you. So as you see in the video, I'm using a battery-powered brad nailer. This is a 16 gauge from Rigid. It's a brushless. It works fantastic. It's convenient if you don't have an air compressor. 3/4 inch, 1 1/4 brads, they work great. Anything bigger, 2.5, like baseboards, expect this thing to bounce on you kind of like a framing gun. So just something to keep in mind of. Like I mentioned before, everything is going to be assembled through a butt joint, so everything's going to be hit with some wood glue and then attached together with 18 gauge brad nails. Use a little bit of clamping pressure if needed on some parts, just making sure everything's nice and tight. Once each individual compartment is done, you got your floating shelves, you got your cubby holes, you got even your drawer. Once all those things are done, they're all going to be mounted the same way. A little bit of wood glue on the back, and then from the back end of the backdrop, we are going to drive 1.25 to 1.5 inch screws into each individual separate part. Now for the cat holes, we went on the larger side, 8 inches. Typically they range between 6 and 8. For the trim pieces themselves, we had a metal shop CNC these brackets for us. They're about 50 bucks for 2. Once we got them, we traced a hole, we laid down tape to prevent chip out, drilled a pilot hole, and then used a really sharp 3 to 4 tooth per inch jigsaw blade and took our time to actually cut right on the line as opposed to inside or the outside to make sure the area is flush when the hardware goes on. As part of the finishing process, we're gonna edge band all the exposed ply with the red oak finishing edge banding veneer. We're gonna iron all on, trim off all the excess, sand the edges flush to make it nice and smooth, and then we're gonna examine the entire project and find where all the brad nail holes are from all the assembling, finishing off with the wood filler that's stainable, and then sand our entire project down with light 150, very light, don't take off the veneer, and then 220 to finish it all off, and then stain. All right, let's talk about the most complicated part of the project. Like I mentioned, is the hardware. Again, they don't sell this stuff, so you're gonna have to get creative and make it your own. Went to my steel shop for the rings. Like I mentioned, they were custom CNC cut. The inside diameter was 8 inches. The wall thickness was 1/8 inch, and the outside frame was 1 inch. Now for the posts, they're made out of the same 065 material, that 1/8 inch. I cut them to be about flush with all the shelves, and then welded on the 1/8 inch plates. They're about 5 by 5 plates. The tubes themselves are 3 inches thickness. After all the welding was done, I started focusing on the hot bluing process. In order to do this, I took the MAP Pro gas and I started heating up the metal and kind of walking with the color changing as it was progressing through the tubes. Once it was up to temp, I then took oil. In fact, this is old oil from my truck, and I started rubbing it on the metal and let it quench and soak into the pores of the metal as it was expanded, and then let it cool down. I did the same thing with the rings as well. Again, heat it up, move the color change. Don't focus on the same spot or else the color will be patchy, and then apply the oil. Once everything was done and cooled off to room temperature, take acetone and rub down all of the oil that's resisting still on the metal, and then you are ready for installation. For installation of the hardware, I used black 1-inch screws that are both decorative and functional at the same time. I then later on proceeded to apply 3 to 4 coats of clear satin finish polyurethane using my HVOP sprayer. It worked fantastically and the coats dried very quickly. Then I was ready to install the scratch post rope themselves. The material is called Cecil. It's a type of rope. The way I secured it is pre-drilling a hole, applying a self-tapping sheet metal screw, wrapping it around tight, and then securing the top end as well. This is both decorative and functional at the same time.
Well, that is it for me this week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and the Mr. Build It Courage and Sweat t-shirts are still out there, so go ahead and snag one and support the channel. There'll be a link down in the description below. Tune in out this week. We'll see you guys next week. See ya. Bye.